Hello and welcome to the first episode of Neil Pickles Presents Fun with Pipettes, or at least fun in my understanding of what fun is. But the idea of this is to give you an introduction on how to use pipettes properly and safely in the laboratory. You'll be getting lots of experience using these, but the first time you use them can be a bit confusing and not quite sure how to deal with them. So there's a series of videos coming up in which we will explain how to use the pipette, the different parts of the pipette, how it works. When using pipettes, it's important to know which pipette you need and which volume you need. And pipettes usually report the volume range in microlitres, unless it's a very large pipette. So just to give you some advice on how to do this, you can see that there are some example volume conversions. The most important one when using most pipettes is this one on the bottom. 1 millilitre equals 1000 microlitres. So if you're asked to pipette 0.5 millilitres, as an example, then on your pipette you would set it to 500 microlitres. Of course, if you're not sure, then you can look at our other guides on how to do volumes, or you can ask during your laboratory sessions. Okay, now it's time to explain to you the different parts of a pipette and how they work. Now you can see in this example we have lots of different types of pipettes. The one that you will use depends on the one that you are given. They all work on the same basic principles. The first rule about using pipettes is they usually come with a stand, so it's important to use a stand like this and not to place the pipettes flat on the bench, and in particular never leave a tip on the end of the pipette. It may have solution in and that may damage the pipette. So use of the rack is important. So now I'll show you one of these as an example and show you the different parts. So if we look at this one, this is a standard pipette, and the first thing that's recorded here is the volume range. Now this pipette has a volume range of 200 to 1000 microlitres, or 0.2 to 1 milliliter. You can adjust the volume setting here. It's set to 500 at the moment. One important thing, this is set between 200 and 1000. Even if when you turn the dial it goes below 200 or above 1000, you shouldn't set it beyond the limits that's specified on the pipette. That's why they have that volume specified. So we adjust the volume by turning this dial. Some of the other pipettes, the dial is slightly different, but it's the same principle. The next important thing about a pipette is how we use it. The shape of the pipette is designed to be held in a particular way like this, with your thumb on the plunger at the top and your hand gripped around the rest of the pipette. And it's important when using the pipette to keep it upright, not to do this, and particularly not to hold it up this way, especially when there's a tip on the top. Now to use a pipette, there are two graduation points on the plunger. To bring a solution up, we press down to the first stopping point, and then to release a solution we press all the way down. But we will show you this more in some example videos when we deliver different volumes of solution. The other part of a pipette to bear in mind is this one here, which is used to discard the pipette tip by pressing down on this. It brings this part of the pipette down and is a way to release the pipette tip without you having to touch the pipette tip yourself. The first example, we're going to pipette a relatively small volume, which is 30 microlitres. but the same principle applies each time. One of the things to do is to make sure you've chosen the correct tips for your pipette, and especially if it's in an autoclaved pipette box, tip box, that means that the tips have been sterilised, and so it's important that you only open the lid long enough to get a pipette tip and place the lid back on as soon as possible. So the first thing to do is to select our pipette tip and put the lid on the box. Now, as mentioned earlier, there are 2 stopping points on the plunger. To bring the liquid up into the pipette tip, we press down to the first stopping point like so. Slowly put the pipette tip in, slowly bring it back up, and you can see the volume in the pipette tip there. And then we transfer to the other receptacle and we press the pipette tip all the way down to the second stopping point and ensure all the liquid is released. And then we discard the pipette tip into waste. This illustration just uses beakers to make it easy to see for you on the video. But remember, you may be using test tubes, Eppendorf tubes, or other types of containers, or perhaps pipetting into wells in a plate, but the same principle applies each time. The next example, we're going to use a slightly larger volume, and this time it's 500 microlitres. It's a different pipette this time and different tips. It's blue tips this time. So we open the box long enough to select the pipette tip and close it again. 2 stopping points as before, down to the first one. Slowly bring the solution up. Transfer, release slowly all the way down, second stopping point, discard the tip. Last but not least, a large volume. 10 millilitres this time with our largest pipette. Same principles apply down to the first stopping point. Slowly bring up the solution. Transfer all the way down to the second stopping point, so all of the liquid has left the pipette tip, and then discard into waste. Well, thank you for watching these videos. I hope that you have found them useful. If you want to ask more questions, you can look online, or you can follow me on Twitter @NAPickles, and I hope you've had almost as much fun as I have.